through it, okay? Brave on through. Okay, so we just learned about thinking and problem solving and intelligence. Before that, we had learning, all kinds of cool cognitive stuff. Concepts, sensation, perception, all kinds of really fun, in my opinion, fun stuff. So what we're going to do next is memory, all right? And if I was to have written the textbook, memory would 100% follow the learning chapter. There is no possible way it would go in any other sequence, because the very definition of memory is any evidence that something learned has been retained. So the very definition of memory requires the word learning. So it feels stupid to me not to just sequence them, right? It's just so logical. Okay? So memory is simply what happens when you learn something, you form a memory, and there it is. Okay? So today we're going to go through the basics of memory and very briefly what brain parts are active during memory, and then we're going to cut there. No matter what time it is, we're going to cut there because it's a real logical break for us. Okay? So, there we go. How does memory function? Okay, well, okay, what is a function? Without memory, every single thing would be brand new every single time. All right? You would look in a mirror and you would say, what is that thing in the mirror? All right? Of course, you wouldn't know what the mirror is, right? Because you'd have to have a memory of the word mirror. You would not exist if you did not have memory. You just couldn't, right? You couldn't use language without memory. How could you? You have to have memory. You have to remember different words and what they mean. A sense of who you are. You know, you have values, political values, religious values. Where do they come from? Experiences in the past, kind of thing. And you remember the things that you've gone through in your lifetime to have your opinions and values. Okay? It would just, and I mean, it's so much more than this, because here, memory allows us to exist in the sense that, you know, you make decisions all day long, right? All day long you make a decision. Oh, the alarm clock rang, should I get out of bed? And the only way you can navigate the decisions is by considering consequences of those decisions. And how do you navigate consequences of decisions? You remember the past. In the past, when I hit the snooze button, what happened? Okay? I'll tell you what happened this morning at 6:30. The dad storms into the 17-year-old daughter's room and said, "Get the hell out of bed, girl." That's the consequence. The dad can't go to work until the girl is in high school, right? So that is dad's job. So it allows us to navigate our world. Like, you know, in the past, it was night followed by day. And therefore, I predict and expect that tomorrow it's going to, day followed by night, day followed by, you can predict your world because you remember what happened in the past. You understand what's going to happen, you have expectations. It's just really, really a powerful thing. Without memory, I don't even know how to work with it. So memory is considered, there it is, any evidence of the persistence of learning over time. Okay? And we're going to talk about different types of evidence. Sometimes the evidence is very straightforward. I say to you, what is the capital of Delaware? And we say Dover. Didn't y'all have to learn this in 5th grade? That was my 5th grade. The rite of passage in 5th grade was memorizing all of the state capitals. And for some reason, so many kids in the class just refused to do it or something, and every single week they had to take this stupid quiz. As soon as you got a perfect score, you're free to go. You can do anything you want. And so for like 8 weeks in a row, while these kids just kept doing this stupid test, I put my nose down and I nailed it the first time and took 8 weeks off. I was like, all right, works for me. So you can recall a simple thing like the capital of Delaware is Dover. But sometimes you don't even have to know the answer necessarily, you just need to recognize it. Does that sound like a multiple choice test? You don't necessarily need to know the answer. This is fill in the blank, this is multiple choice, right? And recognition memory is awesome. Whenever I watch Jeopardy, it's one of these things, every time they say the answer, I knew that one. That's how smart I am. Anyway. Another way that we can assess memory or evidence of memory is relearning. That if you learn a skill and then forget it, and then later on try to learn it again, it becomes much easier. So if you learned a language, then got lazy about it and forgot it because you didn't use it, it will be easier to relearn it the second time than it was to learn it the first time. Right? So, but we can even find memory in some strange places. You remember little baby Albert? Little baby Albert who's afraid of the rat? Remember that? John Watson, dong, rat, that whole deal. And so later on in his life, baby Albert might have a fear of Santa Claus because of his white beard, right? And he was, I have no idea why I'm afraid of Santa Claus. I have no active memory of the situation in my life that led to this fear, but I do have a fear. Any evidence that learning has persisted, okay? And so fears that you have as an adult, you might have any idea where they came from, but it don't matter, okay? All right, so I thought the rule was no headphones and no cell phones, right? That's the rules in the class, okay. So, lots of ways that we can have evidence. So the model of how memory works is based on a 3-step process: encoding, storage, and retrieval. And we're going to break down these processes and try to talk about them as separate processes, okay? So here's a general model. Do I have a better image of it? No, it's not a bad image, it's just a spread. So here's the basic idea. In the world around you are just almost an infinite number of things happen. Visuals, sounds, smells, just an infinite number, okay? Now, of all of these things that are going on, they all move into this thing called sensory memory. Sensory memory is, I do not like the word memory here, because to me it's like a place where things can enter the memory system. Not that they have, but if they're not in the sensory memory, they'll never move forward. They'll never be part of a memory process. Because 99.9% of what is in here disappears and never ever moves into the memory system. Okay? So what happens is, of all of those thousands and millions of things that are out there, some are different in some way or another. Some stick out to you. Okay? They're important for some reason or another. And so what happens is the process of encoding is a process of coming into the memory system. Now here's their encoding is bringing into the memory system. And then here again we see encoding moving. Okay, so encoding. Storage is what's going to occur down here, and retrieval is this one here. So the 3 processes are encoding, storage, and retrieval. And so now what's going to happen is, of those things that are in that sensory memory that make it here, we're going to call this the short-term memory or the working memory. This is, and in fact, in a more advanced way, we call it an executive processor. It's the thing that makes you smart, all right? This is where shit happens, right? You want to accomplish a task, this is it. And it is working in the sense that you use information here to perform a job, but it's also short-term in the sense that it is limited in size and it doesn't last very long. It disappears pretty quick. Okay? So, what do I got? Okay, so yeah, in fact, I'll start with that sensory memory on the top. Now that we kind of got an overview, let me break down the individual slides. So as I said, this sensory memory is very, very brief, incredibly brief. So a 20th of a second, something like that. The idea is I'm looking, close my eyes for 1/20th of a second, every single thing is available in that sensory memory. Okay? That's it, 1/20, and then it's gone. So we also have not just what we call here an iconic memory, but we also can have an echo. So that I'm sure you've had that experience where you're talking to somebody and you're hearing what they say and say, what was that? And before they even repeat the words, oh wait, I caught it, right? You have this echo, this already, and it's just sitting there waiting for a very brief time. Echoic memory lasts longer than iconic, so the visual image goes incredibly fast. The auditory one, it stays a little bit longer. So this stuff was originally discovered by this guy named Sperling. So he would flash this up, and then it would go away, right? He'd flash it really fast, it would go away, and then he would say, tell me the letters. And people would go, KZR, oh, God, I don't know, I forgot, okay? And it was disappearing so fast, they could not even say 9 letters before it was gone, okay? So here's what Sperling did, was he presented this image, very short, just boop, boop, just like that, and then after it was gone, he would put an arrow here, here, or here, indicating which of the 3 lines you needed to get, okay? And so what happened is he flashed it up for just incredibly fast, put the arrow, people are perfect at this task. The idea was for that 1/20th of a second, everything is available, but it disappears so fast that by the time I said KZR, the rest of it disappeared, okay? But any single piece could be recalled. Okay? So we find that some people appear, not very many, but some people have this thing called photographic memory. Photographic memory is this idea that every single thing you've ever seen or done is remembered, all right? And it is really an odd thing. There's really only been one case of documented photographic memory that truly passed the test. Have you ever seen a stereogram? This is these pictures you look at, but it's not a picture, it's a bunch of dots. And you have to focus the left eye and the right eye, and then all of a sudden the 3-dimensional image appears if you did it correctly. Some of you have seen it. So what they did with one girl was they showed her the left side, okay? Put it away, and then showed only the right side. So she had to remember this massive pattern of dots, right? Just a random scramble. And she was able to pull out the memory of that random scramble of dots, and then the one she's seeing, and create the image. All right? You and I, we would not be able to do that. It wouldn't work. Okay? Most people that have photographic memory, they just have very clever techniques. They're just like let's say, when my wife uses a computer, she saves files randomly. She just puts them here, puts them there, you know. And later on, when she needs to find something like her resume, God forbid she can never find. She didn't even name it resume. She'll name the file some random shit. You'll never find it. Me, I have a very efficient system. So we have the same stuff on our computer, but mine is more efficient so that I can pull it all out. That's all that happens with people with great memory, is they're better at the way they sort it and store it and put it out there. Okay? But fundamentally no different. Oh, and by the way, people with actual photographic memory, and we're going to get to this after break, actually suffer from a lot of depression, because the fact is, last summer when you went to Six Flags and you parked in the Bugs Bunny 7 lot, that was really important to remember that until you got back to your car. All of a sudden, it's not relevant information, is it? Can you imagine living life with that kind of shit cluttering up your brain? Last year on August 4th, I parked in the Bugs Bunny 7 lot. Oh my God, you go crazy, man. You don't need that. So, as we said, some of the stuff that is in the sensory memory, just some, will get encoded forward into this working memory. And this is where we get a job done. So my favorite example of something like this would be like, if you're walking down the sidewalk with your friend, you're talking back and forth, and out of the corner of your eye, you see like a telephone pole. Okay? So what do? You bring that information from the telephone pole, that's novel or important, right? You bring it into the working memory. While having the conversation, you navigate around the telephone pole, you keep walking. 2 blocks later, I'm going to say, where was the telephone pole? You go, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying, okay? Because what happened is, it was novel or important, you brought it into working memory, you performed a job, and it disappeared. Okay? There was no reason to move telephone pole into long-term memory over here. There's no reason for it. And it's gone. You perform the function, you got the job done, and you move on. Okay? We find that this working memory, also called, as I said, short-term memory, is limited. It's very limited in the sense that, in fact, there was this one paper that was written that was, so 7 plus or minus 2, the magical number in psychology. That was the title of the paper. And the idea was that this working memory can deal with about 7 pieces of information. Okay? Maybe 2 more, maybe 2 less. Is that why telephone numbers tend to be 7 digits? I bet you there's some relationship there. That's the number of pieces of information that we are generally able to work with at any one time. Okay? So it is limited in its scope, and it is very short term. Okay? It is very, very short. Do I have it? No. Anyway, we'll get to that. It disappears incredibly fast unless you actively work on it. Okay? So if you have a piece of information coming into the working memory, okay, like a telephone number, right? I mean, this is the olden days when you have to actually look it up in a telephone book. Do we even get telephone books anymore? They end up on my front porch and they go straight into the recycling bin, right? I have no desire for that thing cluttering up my house. Well, in the olden days, there was no other choice. So you look up a telephone number. You look up Jenny's number, 8675309, right? All right. One person knows Jenny's number, 8675309. Gotta remember that, 8675309. Jenny got your number. All right, I've dated this song. Nobody knows the song.
I know the song.
You know the song, okay. So anyway, you gotta remember that. So if you don't do something, it's just 7 random digits. So how are you ever going to keep it in your working memory? Rehearse it. 8675309. 8675309. Bang. So I get that now. Oh my God, I feel like that. Last week I had to hook up my printer, a remote printer, and so then I had to go and get the access code from the printer and then bring it back to the computer, and I greatly overestimated my ability to remember a random string of digits, and it took me like 5 tries. I should have just written it down. Oh my God, it's horrible, horrible. Okay. So without active rehearsal, it disappears very quickly. As I said, in different literature, they might not call it working memory, but central executive, because it also is the thing, it gets jobs done, including things like focusing our attention. Okay? So though it is part of the memory system per se, it's so much more. Okay? It's so much more related to the larger process. Or yeah, look at that. Allows you to like mentally rotate or imagine a person, right? So it's so much more than memory because you're bringing out like a mental rotate, those tasks. It's like, here's a shape, and which one of these shapes is the same shape? And you kind of got to, yep, and that's exactly what lets you do that. Okay? Things like that. So, right, hearing a word problem, keeping it in your head until you solved it, stuff. Yeah, so rehearse. Right? So without rehearsal, short-term memories in the working memory there disappear in like 20 seconds. Okay? But what happens is that sometimes, it's really odd, some memories you gotta work hard at. You gotta work hard. Like, oh my God, what is the definition of effortful processing? And you have to put it on a flashcard. It's a lot of work. But sometimes, what did you eat for breakfast this morning? Honeycombs. All right? I didn't have to make any active attempt to remember that. Or if you go to a room, afterwards somebody say, where was the furniture? And you're like, you know what, I can lay out the furniture in that room even though I made no effort to remember that piece of information. You know what I mean? It just happens automatically. Okay? So, pretty cool. Different stuff. So often we get what we call implicit memories. That is ones that we cannot really tell you where they came from. Declarative memories, these are facts. The reason I know Dover is the capital of Delaware is Mrs. Gallus in 5th grade made us memorize it. Okay? So I can tell you exactly where it came from in that case. Sometimes, however, things such as riding a bicycle, that is difficult, because I could say, how do you ride a bike? And in some kind of a way it's declarative. You can say, well, you sit on the seat and you put your feet on the pedals, but after that, are you going to be able to verbalize how you ride a bike? And then you shift your balance, and then you change the weight, and you, I don't know. I couldn't begin to tell you how I ride a bike. Okay? So many procedures are remembered in a uniquely different way. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about the brain stuff. We use this word memory to capture a whole variety of things, but as far as the brain goes, they are such radically different procedures that I don't know why we decide to call them all memory, right? They're so fundamentally different, involving different parts of the brain, different connections, different activations, and it's just, we just lump all these different skills together and just say memory, but it's not. It's a whole bunch of different stuff, okay? So the way that we remember how to ride a bicycle is so fundamentally different than the way we remember how to the capital of Delaware, okay? It's just such a fundamentally different process as to be, they're not the same. They're just not, okay? Right? What we find kind of interesting, in this study, they had like 12 words. They're like, we're going to tell you 12 words, and you've got to remember as many as you can. Okay? So they start telling people words, right? The first word is table. And you're like, okay, great. Table. And you actively rehearse that. Table. The second word is window. Okay? Table. You repeat it over and over. Table. Then the third word is book. Okay, table, window, book. All right, go through 12 of them. So here's what's going to happen. If, as soon as you learn those 12 words, I ask you, tell me as many as you can remember. Number one, you're going to remember the most recently heard words because they're still in your working memory. They're still in the short-term memory there. Okay? You're going to remember the ones at the beginning fairly well because you rehearsed them the most. Table, kept getting repeated, right? If I do the same thing, but come back in an hour and ask you to remember things, all of a sudden, the short-term memory advantage that you had is gone. But you still have this stuff at the beginning where you started with all of your rehearsal. So pretty cool, whatever. Mm-hmm. It has huge implications in certain places, like politics, for example. If you're in a political debate, do you want to go first or second? Are they going to remember the message? What's going to be? Depends on when somebody's going to vote. You know, is the voting going to happen immediately after the debate, or is the voting going to happen a couple of days later? And so, I mean, as silly as it might look, it has huge implications for world. And I mean, it would be the same thing for advertisers. You know, advertising a product that a person could, in fact, purchase at this exact moment is radically different than advertising for a product which currently is not available in the environment, okay? It's just a different world. So as we said, this short-term memory, there it was, 7 plus or minus 2. And what happened in this study, what they did, this is a very, very interesting one. They would give people a combination of 3 letters, VMF, for example, okay? Now, if I said, here's 3 letters, VMF, I want you to remember these 3 letters. You can do it, VMF. An hour later, you can do VMF. Gotcha? But what if I prevented you from rehearsing? Okay? The only reason you remember an hour later is you actively were going VMF. So here's the deal. I'm going to give you the 3 letters, and then I'm going to give you a number. The number is 709. You have to count backward by 3s from 709. 706, 703. It's a pretty difficult process, and it prevents you from rehearsing VMF. Okay, you get the idea? So we put something into your short-term memory, we prevent you from rehearsing it. After 3 seconds, half of it is gone. Half the information here is gone in 3 seconds. 6 seconds. By the time you're at 18 seconds, there's nothing. There is nothing in there without rehearsal. So when we call it short-term memory, we mean literally short. I mean, just gone, plummeting, gone, without keeping it actively working. Okay. Memories can be broken down. We could look at long-term memories. And long-term memories, it's kind of interesting when we go to this model that we were talking here. We could say that working memory here is kind of like, if you know anything about computers, the RAM, the processor that you use. That is, this is the stuff that is up on your screen at any given time. And on your computer, you have files in your hard drive. That's long-term memory. Files in your hard drive will never help you out unless they are brought here onto your screen. So it's like, oh, but I have a file with all that information, but I can't find it. Then it's garbage to you. Okay? So information here in long-term memory has no purpose except to keep it so that later on when you need to do a job, you can retrieve it. So we've got encoding going in, storage in long-term memory, retrieval. Right? That's the third step in the process. And so in long-term memory, we find that memories can be, as we already described, explicit versus implicit, or you can verbalize it versus you cannot verbalize it kind of a thing. And if you can verbalize it, it can be episodic. That is, when I was 7 years old, I got a box of blueberry cereal for my birthday. I literally remember that. As sad as that might be. Anyway, all right. Explicit knowledge that could be the capital of Delaware is. Implicit, as we said, how to ride a bicycle. Implicit, like baby Albert that was afraid of Santa Claus but had no idea why. Okay? So lots of different ways to break down memories. No. Hermann Ebbinghaus he was the 19th century's biggest nerd. But I'm just going to go like that. But here's basically what happens is Ebbinghaus did a really weird study where he would memorize a bunch of nonsense syllables, right? Just, L, U, R, something. Just a consonant vowel consonant that made no sense. And he would memorize them all on the first day, and then he would come back on the next day and try to remember them. And almost inevitably he couldn't remember them because they were nonsense syllables. Okay, so if on the first day it took me, 10 times to learn all of these words, on the second day it might only take me 5 times. Okay, you get the idea? That's relearning. That's the whole relearning principle. And so he put together this learning curve based on that. And the idea is that this is how memory works. The first day, we lose a huge chunk of memory. The second day, it's a little less, and look at that, then it levels off. And so it's really an interesting function, and it's like, so after 5 days, you only remember 30% of what you put in there. Yep, that's it, 30%. Make sure it's the good ones, right? All right. We find here, when we think about memory from a much larger perspective, they took people and they asked them to, I want you to write down as many memories about your life as you can remember, all right? As many things as you can. And what they found was a few different things here. Number one, there was almost no memories from this early age. There's just very, very, very few, okay? And my first memory was, I was 3 years old, and I was standing with my brother and my dad behind his blue Chevy, right? You know what I found out when I was older? There is a photograph of that moment in an old scrapbook. Do you think I have my earliest memory at 3 years old, or do you think that something else is going on there, okay? Something else is happening. Then what happens is, obviously we're asking older people here because, right? There's what we call a reminiscence bump. Somewhere around 20 years old. This is the greatest time in your life. I know, you're like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm suffering through college with no money. But this is where your life is changing. You become an adult, you move out of the house, you go to college, and everything, first girlfriend, first, God, I don't know what you got going on. I mean, everything is fresh and new for you guys. As much as you're like, this is the best time of my, yes, it does nothing but better, down from there. And then what happens is that there is a standard forgetting curve right here for more recent events. Okay? What happened yesterday I remember pretty well. Last week, 3 weeks ago, a month ago. But then when I get into adolescence, I remember all of this. So, pretty cool idea right there. So, yeah, there's the childhood amnesia is universal, even if some people claim it's not. It is. So standard. So very briefly on some of the brain areas active in or activated during learning memories rather. The prefrontal cortex. Wait, do I have that image? I had one image somewhere, and I just thought I had it here. Why don't I have that? I didn't skip it, did I? No, because I saw it. Oh, there. I saw it this morning. Oh, because it's 2 slides up. Okay. Ha! I knew I wanted it. All right. So, what's really interesting is they've asked people, do you think memory works like this? Okay? Imagine this. Memory is like a safety deposit box. So, you remember something, you put it in the box, and then a week later, you go to the deposit box, and you open it up, and there's your memory. Okay? And when they ask the average American person, they go, yeah, that's a pretty good analogy, right? That's a pretty good description of how memory works, right? And in particular, this is problematic because it is not how memory works. And what we find is that in the criminal justice system, our entire justice system is based on, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that is only logical if memory is like a safety deposit box where you put the money in, you come back, and it does not work like that. Okay? What happens is so many potential problems. We'll expand on them in next after break. But that is just not going to be what happens. If you go to open that safety deposit box, maybe part of the memory will be gone. Maybe something will be added to the memory. Maybe the memory will combine with another memory to make something that didn't exist, like your memory of standing behind a Chevy with your brother when in fact it's a photograph, right? Who knows what's going to happen with things in long-term memory? Okay? And yet our whole legal system, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. No. So what happened was some early researchers wanted to find out, where is memory? They wanted to find a location in the brain for a memory. So Carl Lassie, an early neuroscientist, he took a bunch of rats and he taught them how to run mazes, right? And then what he did was he did surgery on all the rats, and he would remove a slightly different piece of the brain on each rat. He was hoping to find like 99 rats that could run this, that could still do the task, and one that would fail completely. Then he would know exactly which part of the brain stored the memory. And he just couldn't find it. Instead, what he found was that it had nothing to do with the location of the brain that was removed. It had to do with the quantity of the brain that was removed. And so the idea was that memories are stored across the entire cortex. And so for a little rat running a maze, the memory of the site of the maze might be over here. The memory of how the smell of the maze is over here. And the memory of how my whiskers feel when it touches the wall, that's over there. So what Lassie was doing was he was removing a part of each memory. He could not remove the memory because the memory was all across the entire surface. Okay? So that was a good study. In fact, this is more of a better conception of how memory might work. You might have a memory of taking the dog for a walk, okay? But you know what? That will be tied into memories of the park that you took the dog. That will be connected to other memories of dogs, which will also be connected to the fact that you have a cat, right? And the dog will be connected to and connected and connected and connected. And so this is what happens, is that memories do not exist in isolation, okay? They become part of a much, and in fact, this is how artificial intelligence creates memories. There was this Japanese company that invented a robot, okay? And what happens for so many robots or even home computers is when you get them into your house, it's already programmed with all kinds of standard information, right? This Japanese company said, no, we're gonna send you a little baby robot, okay? This baby robot is gonna be empty. And what's gonna happen is this baby robot is gonna interact in your house and is going to generate a field like this based on experiences in your home to make that robot uniquely capable to do the things you need it to do, okay? So it takes a good 6 months to get this robot up and running because it's got to get the basics, where things are located, etc. But in the end, you get a personalized robot that builds its entire memory structure based on this kind of an idea, okay? Interrelationships, no such thing as isolated files. Okay? So, it's powerful stuff. Okay. So, we find that memories tend to first enter the hippocampus here. The hippocampus is that part of the brain where memories are first stored. And in some kind of a way, when a memory is in the hippocampus, it is a discrete unit. It's an element. It's independent on its own. But then what happens is, over the course of about 2 weeks, this independent memory that's in the hippocampus integrates into the cerebral cortex and becomes part of this web and can no longer be isolated. Okay? So it starts as an isolated thing, but becomes in here. Well, it turns out that this process of moving information from the hippocampus to the cortex seems to happen while you're sleeping. And this is to me the best explanation about what dreaming is about, right? Dreaming is what happens because we tend to dream about whatever happened that day, right? In fact, just last night, my wife lost the television remote. It became a hyper panic. Where's the remote? She wants to watch her Korean dramas, but she can't find the remote, right? And guess what I dreamed about last night? Not able to find the remote. All right? I'm like, how crazy is that? All right? I don't know if that's coincidence or not. I doubt it. Okay? So they've discovered this thing actually with dogs. They took some dogs and they taught them to do a trick. And then what they did was they would, after teaching this dog a trick, they would remove the hippocampus. Okay? And here's the deal. If you teach a dog a brand new trick and then immediately remove the hippocampus, the dog remembers nothing. If you teach a dog a trick, wait 1 day, remove the hippocampus, the dog remembers elements of the trick. And if you teach a dog a trick, wait 2 full weeks and remove the hippocampus, the dog's got it. It doesn't need, it remembers exactly what has to happen. So that's where they've established that 2-week rule. That it's gradual across that 2 weeks. I mean, most of the job is done well before 2 weeks. But 2 weeks seems to be where the entire process is done and done. Okay? It is absolutely possible for people to have damage to the hippocampus and have an inability to form new memories. Right? People that have damage to the hippocampus, some of the famous patients, a guy damages his hippocampus in a fencing accident, with a fencing. And what happens is, every single morning when this guy wakes up, he walks into the bathroom, he looks in the mirror, and he goes, who the hell is that looking back at me? Because it's been 30 years. And so he sees himself in the mirror and says, who is that old man looking at me? Okay? He does not remember his caregivers. Every single morning they have to introduce themselves. He'll remember it for like 10 minutes, but after that, no, it's gone. In a pretty powerful way. But what's really interesting is even though this guy cannot remember anything like this, here's the deal. They pull out a task. I don't have a picture of it. It's pretty fun. Imagine you've got a little maze and you just got to trace through the maze with a pencil. But the key is you can't look at your hand. So there's something blocking your view of the hand and there's a mirror. You can see a reflection of your hand and you're supposed to trace in the maze. It's really hard to do, okay? But the more you practice, the better you get. So they give it to this guy with hippocampus damage, and what happens is that every day they bring the thing out and goes, oh, that's pretty cool, what is it? And they explain the rules, and he plays it, and he does it. And then after about 5 days, he's still saying, what is it? But when he goes to do the task, he is a grandmaster expert. He's like, just like that. So he's able to create a procedural memory, even though he has absolutely no ability to create the explicit memory required to remember that he has in fact done this before. Okay? In the same guy, they actually did Where's Waldo? Are you the generation that did Waldo, or was that before you? Y'all know who he is, but all right. And so they'll do a Where's Waldo book, and just like all of us, the first day it'll be like, I don't know. But you show this thing about it for a week, and the guy just goes page after page. There it is, there it is, there it is. But has absolutely no memory of ever having done the task before. Okay? Just never saw it. I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. So, very cool. You find the cerebellum. Remember, the cerebellum in the back of the brain was the one that was responsible for things like coordination and things like that. Okay? And so your memory of riding a bicycle will be up here in the cerebellum. That's where it's going to store. The basal ganglia is going to be procedural memories as well, yeah. And no, I already said infantile amnesia. In fact, infantile amnesia, one of the reasons that people tend to have infantile amnesia, this inability to remember, it goes like this. This is a fairly complex web of memories, okay? Before you have a complex web of memories, every individual memory for an infant is not connected to anything else. It's just a separate unit of information. Is it easy to remember a bunch of random things, or is it easier to remember a bunch of things that are related to each other? Right? I can remember all the parts of a tree because they're all on the tree, okay? Now ask me to remember 10 separate nouns that have no relationship. And so that's the idea, is that as you get a more sophisticated network, individual memories have a place to go. And so at the beginning, infants have nothing. They cannot remember. Okay? Just can't. Right? All right. Another interesting phenomenon is a flashbulb memories. And now, of course, generations have passed, but I have a very explicit memory of 9/11. I mean, that day is, I was in my office in Pittsburgh, and I heard some weird chatter in the hallway, and it was something about planes and buildings, and it wasn't making sense to me. And I remember going out into the hallway, and somebody in the lab across the hall had a black and white television in their lab. I never saw it before, but there it was. I remember still being very confused, and I went back to my office and tried to go to CNN.com, but the whole web was locked up. You know, everybody was I remember calling my wife and saying, I think I better come home. I don't know what's happening. I remember sitting on that bus, looking at other passengers, and wondering if there was maybe some other larger conspiracy going on. But I remember everything from that day. I remember going home. I remember getting all of the phone calls from people over in Korea to make sure that we weren't in fact dead. Right? I mean, I remember all of it, detail. How about my memory of September 10th, 2001? I ain't got one. I got nothing. September 12th. Nope. I bet you I could do something on September 12th, because that was the day everybody was watching the television to see if the Twin Towers were actually going to collapse, right? They hadn't collapsed yet, they were still burning. So they feel perfectly accurate, but research studies have shown they are not as accurate as we think they are, okay? Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD is a very big deal for the United States military. soldiers are coming back from the wars in the Middle East with PTSD. It is a mental health crisis, and the Department of Veterans Affairs is failing these people miserably. They are just not giving the support that these people need. So with post-traumatic stress disorder is people that have gone through incredibly stressful events, be it war or sometimes rape or something of this nature, that after the event occurs, the event is remembered in such detail, to the point where you can't not remember it. Okay? It's not a problem of oh, I forgot. No, you cannot forget. It's just burned inside of you. And as you know, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, it makes sense, because if you go through an incredibly stressful situation, like a bear attack, okay, if you survive that, you damn well better remember every single sight, sound, smell. You better remember, because if you manage to survive, you aren't going to survive twice if you don't take every piece of information from that horrible situation. So it's a way of saying, if something involves a lot of emotions, you should remember every detail so that you can survive later. Okay? The amygdala, absolutely, we find that emotions arise in the amygdala, and the amygdala is involved in the storage of any kind of emotionally charged memories. And finally here today, we can isolate brain changes in response to memories. In this case, what happens is they're just doing a stupid task. They're just something like this. And when they first started doing the task, this is how the different neurons connect to each other. Two neurons, and they're connected. After doing this for 2 hours, we've got two neurons, and there's a connection between them. So it literally changes with experience. Okay? And in fact, the entire basis of this comes from Hebb's law. Hebb's law simply says neurons that are active at the same time become connected. Right? He literally said neurons that fire together wire together. So if when you see salt on the table, there is also pepper next to it. Therefore, salt will be associated with pepper. Right? That's it. That's all the neural basis of memory is that neurons that are firing at the same time connect to each other. Pretty easy, right? Easy peasy. All right, so I'm going to stop it there, because as I said, we're going to talk about, we talked about how memory is supposed to work. Now, next time we're going to talk about the forgetting side. And the forgetting side is perhaps more important than the remembering side. Okay? So, have a nice break. Bring back a suntan. Please don't bring back a COVID. Yeah, all right. Some things I want you to bring back. Others, no. Okay, I got Kaya today. John today. Who else came in late? I didn't even see you come in. Okay, 1 second. Here. Who else was it? Came in? Okay, Adriel?
No.
Who are you? Who? Oh, Shayla?
Yes.
Oh.
I don't remember if you said my name or not. I come in late, but Kamaya.
Kamaya? Yeah, I think so. Oh, I forgot. Was you? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, okay. I got you. Nicole, yes. Ms. Perez, and I got you.